the wrap party ended. The Andy Griffith Show. Even though Ron Howard was the star of the Andy Griffith Show and had a red head, life wasn't always easy in Mayberry, where there were white picket fences. On television, people saw a close-knit, small-town family, but in reality, life was far more challenging. Although Howard enjoyed his time with Don Knotts and Andy Griffith, he harbored a secret hatred for one cast member, and he wasn't alone. Additionally, that individual initiated the altercation that even Andy Griffith could not forget. Though it has been kept a secret for decades, it was true that there was stress and fury. Behind Mayberry's back, this group member was the source of problems. There was much more going on in Mayberry than met the eye, despite the fact that many people recall the Andy Griffith Show as one of the most charming and sentimental programs ever. On CBS, the program debuted on October 3rd, 1968, and ran until April 1, 1968. Over the course of 8 seasons, it featured 249 half-hour episodes, 90 in color and 159 in black and white. The show depicted a simpler era, but it wasn't always as tranquil as the community it depicted. Andy Griffith starred Sheriff Andy Taylor, a divorced police officer in the peaceful hamlet of Mayberry, North Carolina, who is raising his little son Opie, played by a young Ron Howard. The show began as a sneak peek on the Danny Thomas Show. Griffith claimed that despite the fact that the scene was fictional, it felt very nostalgic, more like the 1930s than the 1960s. Griffith subsequently remarked it was of a time gone by, capturing the show's enchantment. Don Knotts played the excessively enthusiastic yet comically inept Deputy Barney Fife, and the cast of characters quickly became beloved American icons. The gentle and dependable Aunt Bee was portrayed by Frances Xavier, and Opie, who was youthful and old at the same time. Because they were so close, fans believed that they felt like a true family when they were together. There were moments when things didn't go as planned, despite the fact that the Andy Griffith Show was often humorous. Tensions were rising off camera as personalities didn't always mesh and egos clashed. One altercation between Andy Griffith and a cast member would remain hidden from the public for decades while the cameras were rolling. However, Mayberry was unable to maintain secrets indefinitely. Nevertheless, the show was a big success. In the Nielsen ratings, it never fell below 7th place, and at the conclusion of its most recent season, it was the top-rated program, something that doesn't happen very frequently. Only Seinfeld and I Love Lucy have that distinction. Knotts and Xavier earned 6 Emmys over the show's existence, whereas Griffith was the only one who did not. Although the town never really existed and the show was anything but straightforward behind the scenes, fans still celebrate Mayberry at an annual festival in Griffith's hometown of Mount Airy, North Carolina, and there were spin-offs such as Gomer Pyle, USMC, a reunion film in 1986, and the continuation series Mayberry RFD. On that set, however, one boy was discreetly preparing for a life beyond the front porch and fishing rod, even though others were still interested in the Mayberry story. About Ron Howard. Today, Ron Howard is mostly recognized as a well-known and esteemed Hollywood director. On one of the most watched episodes of the show, however, he was America's favorite red-headed youngster before he became a director. On March 4th, 1954, Ronald William Howard was born in Duncan, Oklahoma. His family was in show industry. His father was Ron Howard. He was a writer, director, and actor. His stage name was changed from Ron Howard. When Ron was born, his father, Ron, had served 3 years in prison, U.S. Air Force. His mother, Jean Spiegel Howard, was an actor. Thus, he grew up surrounded by the entertainment industry. German, English, Scottish, Irish, and Dutch ancestors are all represented in Ron's family tree. He would play good folks who shared his American heritage. He received some of his education in California's Burbank schools, including John Burroughs High School, and some on the sets of film studios like DeSilk, where he was trained as a child actor. He eventually attended but did not complete his studies at USC's esteemed School of Cinematic Arts. His calling was already pulling him in a different direction. By the time he was 5 years old, Ron Howard had accomplished a lot. The Journey was his first motion picture. He soon appeared in television series such as The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, Dennis the Menace, The Twilight Zone, and The DuPont Show with June Allison. However, it was his role as Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show in 1960 that truly made him famous. Everything changed because of IT. For all 8 seasons of the show, he portrayed Andy Griffith, the young son of Sheriff Andy Taylor. He went by Ronnie Howard at the time. Howard recalled being preoccupied with a fake turtle that he had to pretend was real and dead during his first few days on set. I remember him looking at that little turtle and talking to me about how it was kind of funny to have to pretend that it was dead, he continued. Thus, I just recall a fairly composed initial opinion. The series consistently has the ideal balance of subtly humorous and helpful counsel. The Andy Griffith Entertainment attempted to seem like an old-fashioned Americana entertainment despite the fact that it was broadcasted in the 1960s. It was timeless, brought back fond memories, and exuded a pleasant vibe. Don Knotts' iconic portrayal of Barney Fife, Frances Bevier's sage and compassionate Aunt Bee, and the numerous vibrant characters from Mayberry helped establish the show as a staple in American homes. Despite receiving 3 nominations for Outstanding Comedy Series, it never took home the trophy. What an uptake. The show's co-stars Knotts and Bevier won a combined 6 acting Emmys. But the Andy Griffith Show wasn't the end of Howard's career. Indeed, it became more powerful. Playing Richie Cunningham on Happy Days in 1974 was his second big break. What began as a blunt American-style segment swiftly became a popular program. The handsome, well-groomed Richie Howard was Henry Winkler's right match for Fonzie, who wore a leather jacket. Fans on the set contributed to the show's success in popular culture by having genuine chemistry both on and off screen. Still thinking about things other than playing, Howard was not only thinking about playing. While he was creating Happy Days, he was already learning about life behind the camera. He co-wrote the low-budget action comedy Grand Theft Auto with his father, which he directed for the first time in 1977. The opportunity was part of a shrewd agreement with director Roger Corman. If Howard could make his own film, it would be Eat My Dust. It was a significant shift. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Howard directed many television films for NBC. Skyward 1980, starring the iconic Bette Davis, was one of them. His big debut as a filmmaker came with the 1982 release of Night Shift, starring Shelley Long, Michael Keaton, and Henry Winkler. Now Howard was a fresh creative force behind the lens. He was unstoppable after that. In 1984, he directed the romantic fantasy comedy Splash, starring John Candy, Eugene Levy, Daryl Hannah, and Tom Hanks. The film's success at the box office and among critics demonstrated that Howard could create hits that were heartfelt, enjoyable, and appealed to a broad audience. It began with a toy turtle and a role as Opie Taylor, but it developed it into a lifetime career. Ron Howard was more than simply a kid's idol. As a youth, he was taught to tell stories, and he ensured that Hollywood would never forget that while he worked behind the camera. However, Howard honed his craft on a set that wasn't quite as sunny as it appeared, even before the accolades, box office successes, and director recognition. Although Mayberry appeared to be a peaceful place, there were actually serious issues there, tension that no camera could properly capture. The set of the Andy Griffith Show became uncomfortable in a number of ways. Behind the scenes, 2 of the greatest stars of the event were actually sharing some of the most heartwarming stories. In the mid-1900s, Andy Griffith and Frances Bavier were well-known entertainers and TV stars. Their sympathetic portrayals of Aunt Bee and Sheriff Andy Taylor were their most well-known roles. Although they appeared to get along well on film, their interactions off-screen were far from cordial. The friction between Griffith and Bavier added drama to a film that was primarily about cheerful people, much like the well-known difficult friendship between Selena Gomez and Francia. This separation has long piqued the imagination of pop history scholars and fans. Strong personality conflicts and divergent views on what was appropriate in the job were the root of their issues. It was more than a little miscommunication. It developed into a long-lasting Cold War behind Mayberry's white picket gates. The show's history now includes this behind-the-scenes dispute, which was frequently rumored but never verified, clouding viewers' pleasant memories of the Andy Griffith. The story's conclusion: Andy Griffith was the show's main character, portraying Sheriff Andy Taylor with a stern hand and a warm smile. Without ever making a sound, Sheriff Taylor maintained order in Mayberry. He was the moral hub of the community, a smart policeman and a father who had lost his wife. With ageless grace, he managed parenting, law enforcement, and neighbor disputes. The warm, genuine, and subtly courageous tone of the concert was established by his charm. On the episode, Frances Bavier shared that cozy environment as Aunt Bee, Andy Taylor's strict but loving aunt. In addition to caring for others, Aunt Bee served as the Taylor family's spiritual center. Her persona offered heartfelt counsel, gentle reprimands, and consoling dinners. Bavier's portrayal as the quintessential TV aunt helped make Aunt Bee a cultural figure, because they gave them a sense of belonging to a community. Sheriff Taylor and Aunt Bee were adored by millions of people. Their parts were ideal representations of a small-town family, but behind the scenes, things were far more problematic. Griffith and Bavier disagreed on how to carry out their duties and treat one another, which is why they were at odds, according to classic country music. Because of her reputation for being extremely private, Bavier avoided her co-stars. However, outside of work, Andy Griffith was gregarious and extroverted. Bavier's liking of solitude led some to perceive her as chilly or aloof, but her high expectations were more problematic than her shyness. She valued her work, and she expected others to share that value. The actor who portrayed Little Opie Taylor, Ron Howard, has frequently discussed how Griffith improved the atmosphere on the set. Howard Morris, who portrayed Ernest T. Bass in some of the episodes, once described working with Bavier as like navigating a landmine. She was very particular about her space and appearance, so anyone who attempted to alter that was not welcome. A seemingly simple order, like telling her to move a few inches so the camera can frame her, could cause strong resistance. According to an interview cited by Cheat Sheet, Griffith describes a remarkable and agonizing attempt at reconciliation. Without telling her, he had visited Bavier's home and made an effort to patch things up. The move was unsuccessful. Bavier, who was quite protective of her private, was furious about the unexpected visit. The meeting increased the barrier between them and exacerbated existing wounds rather than healing them. However, things began to alter as she approached the end of her life. Life has the ability to humble even the most resilient hearts. Bavier picked up the phone and contacted Griffith while he was battling cancer, which allowed him time to reflect. After years of tension, she was at last prepared to speak the truth. She acknowledged being tough, commended his leadership on the show, and gave him a lot of credit for its success. Griffith later recalled the incident and stated, "Bavier sincerely apologized. I'm sorry we didn't get along better. It was my fault. It was a powerful deed that put an end to years of bad feelings that no one could go past." Final days, Frances Bavier passed away in 1989, at the age of 86. Although she spent her final years in North Carolina, where her on-screen persona Aunt Bee had resided, she was born and raised in New York City. She relocated to the small hamlet of Siler City in 1972 after quitting acting, where she discovered friendship and tranquility. In the local community, she was recalled as quiet yet kind, which contrasted sharply with her misinterpreted image in Hollywood. Bavier experienced numerous health problems in the final years of her life. The majority of them were heart-related. During her final days, she received medical attention at Chatham Hospital. Only a week before she passed away, she was transferred from the coronary care unit, but her condition remained dire. Although the cause of her death was never disclosed, many believe it was due to her persistent cardiac issues. In her final days, she maintained the same degree of deference and modesty that had pervaded her whole life and career. Andy Griffith would live to be 86 as well. He passed away quietly at home on Roanoke Island, North Carolina, early on Tuesday morning, according to CNN Entertainment. Although the specific illness that claimed his life was not disclosed, the entertainment industry suffered a great loss. According to a statement from Griffith's family, he was laid to rest on Roanoke Island, which was his favorite spot to be, and where he had found serenity. Both celebrities' passing signaled the end of an era, and served as a reminder to viewers of the more nuanced tales that lurk underneath TV's polished exterior. Despite their long-standing animosity, Andy Griffith and Frances Bavier were eventually able to reconcile. In the end, it made no difference who was right or wrong. It was about two people choosing to let go after recognizing the positive aspects of one another. They left a legacy of talent, generosity, and at the end, forgiveness. The next chapter in Ron Howard's life began in the background, as the tale of his early years on the Andy Griffith Show drew to an end, a match made in heaven. A certain kind of love isn't often featured in the media. It doesn't shout or call out for attention. It simply continues, slowly and quietly, decade after decade. Ron and Cheryl Howard fell in love in this way. In the midst of all the flings, public heartbreaks, and short-lived relationships that make headlines in Hollywood, Ron and Cheryl created something genuine and uncommon. On June 7, 2025, they celebrated 50 years of marriage. That's half a century of developing, dreaming, creating, and continuing to choose one another every day. Ron gave them a photo of the couple at sunset on the beach on their 50th wedding anniversary. There was no red carpet or major event, just two folks who have known each other for a long time in the cozy glow of a sunset. He compared his love for her to a river trip with both calm and choppy waters. He was grateful for the travel, the memories, and his family. He claimed that a straightforward strategy, continuing to push, was the key to their success. When they were 16 years old, they first met. Both of them were Californians with lofty aspirations. He looked terrific with his freckles and red hair. You remembered her because of her calm strength. He consistently asserted that there was no one else, and that she was the only one. They had a very romantic first date, reminiscent of the 1970s. Ron drove Cheryl to the movie theater in his mint green Volkswagen Beetle. They went to buy pizza after the movie. Although it wasn't an expensive vehicle, it got them where they had to go. 5 years later, in June 1975, they said "I do" in Burbank, California, and Ron would chuckle. "It still runs great, and so do we." The guests included family members, friends, and a few Happy Days co-stars, including the late Tom Bosley. Ron's life had changed significantly in just 1 year on the show, but he was confident that Cheryl would always be there for him. She didn't immediately answer yes, though. Actually, it required 3 concepts. Always cautious and considerate, Cheryl informed him that she wasn't yet ready. Before she linked her future to his, she intended to attend school, live her life, and create her own. Over time, Bryce, their daughter, would describe her mother as a natural force that held everyone, even Ron, accountable. According to Cheryl, she was initially drawn to Ron because of his passion for stories. It continues to do so. Together, they brought up 4 children, and 2 of them, Bryce and Paige, entered the film industry. The Howards were a team as well as a Hollywood family. They met because they both enjoyed storytelling, and it was obvious that the best story they had ever told was about love, according to Cheryl. Their children frequently referred to Cheryl as the family's heart. At one point, Paige claimed that trying to express their love for their mother brought tears to her eyes. She claimed that because Cheryl led them, she was like the sun, moon, and stars. However, it wasn't always simple. Ron concurs that communication is crucial, and that love alone is insufficient. Additionally, luck is helpful. Growing together is the most important thing, he says. You must adjust, modify, and allow one another to develop. Additionally, you must remain in the middle. Their connection remained strong because of this. In this way, even as their worlds expanded, their lives remained interconnected. In addition to their love for one another, Ron believes he is extremely fortunate to have them in his life because of the lessons, gifts, and silent understanding that have sustained them over the past 50 years. From early call times on set to late nights with newborns, and from sadness to joy, they have experienced it all together. In 2023, Ron took Cheryl around in the identical mint green VW Bug they had on their first date as a surprise for their anniversary. The one from their first date, that is. They took the long route, let the wind blow, and pondered the beginning of it all. There were no champagne toasts or luxury eateries. All that was left were the thoughts of the previous 50 years, the road and the gentle hum of the engine. The peaceful type of love known as patient love is frequently overlooked in Hollywood. It's the kind that's built in kitchens, minivans, and goodnights when you're exhausted, not in fairy tales. But Ron and Cheryl remembered. They have protected, cared for, and lived it. They don't have a loud love tale. It's not required, it is constant, unending, and continuing to improve even after half a century. Controversies surrounding Ron Howard. Ron Howard outperformed nearly every other actor in making a lasting impression both in front of and behind the camera. He's in a very small group with big names like George Clooney, Bradley Cooper, Jordan Peele, Clint Eastwood, and Greta Gerwig. But unlike most of them, Howard is more well known for his work as a director than for his performance in films. It all began with television in the 1960s and 1970s. He portrayed Richie Cunningham on Happy Days after playing a small role as Opie on The Andy Griffith Show. Although Howard rose to fame as one of America's most adored child stars, he was preparing for something much greater by studying and observing. In 1977, he made his directorial debut with the bizarre little film Grand Theft Auto. The video game wasn't the issue. It had a lot of heart, happened fast, and became dirty. After then, Howard's name became well known in Hollywood. However, it didn't occur all at once. He had to trip a few of times in the 1980s. Willow was a courageous action film, and Tom Hanks starred in the entertaining romantic fantasy film Splash. His abilities were displayed, but not everyone was yet impressed. The ascent of Ron Howard, the 2000s, then arrived, and that year saw the publication of both How the Grinch Stole Christmas and A Beautiful Mind. Everything changed at this point. A gifted mathematician, John Nash, battled mental illness. His real experience served as the basis for A Beautiful Mind. It was powerful, heartfelt, and something I will always remember. The film starred Christopher Plummer, Ed Harris, Jennifer Connelly, and Brooke Shields. Many predicted it would win as early as the Golden Globes, and it did. In addition to winning Best Picture, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay, Howard was named Best Director. They weren't all cheering either. A few were angry. Important details regarding Nash's life, such as the fact that he didn't provide for the child, were omitted, despite the fact that he was bisexual and had a child outside of marriage. Howard came under fire for diluting the facts. Even though he later claimed that certain passages were removed to concentrate on the story's core idea, the criticism persisted. The remarks didn't bother Howard in the least. That's how it started to harm Nash directly. That went too far, he said. Who was Ron Howard's biggest enemy? Despite being in the public spotlight for nearly 70 years, Ron Howard has earned the nickname Hollywood's calmest storm. Producers trust him because of his steady, quiet voice when they want results rather than drama. However, even that man has boundaries that he won't allow others to violate. Howard turned J.D. Vance's best-selling autobiography, Hillbilly Elegy, into a popular Netflix film. Howard worked very hard on this project, emphasizing how sturdy and hardy Vance's childhood was. At the time, they didn't discuss politics much. At the time, Vance was not a senator. Politics had nothing to do with him. For Howard, that was a huge success. His objective was to find a narrative, not a policy partner. This man has changed since Howard's time trying to comprehend him. Now a politician, Vance may be on the verge of becoming vice president. Howard used to know him in a totally different way than he does today. The director has expressed his dismay and displeasure at what Vance has become, without making a huge deal out of it. Making a scene is not Howard's style. That's not how he's been. This time, however, something broke. The lessons that will last. His most recent tone was noteworthy for someone whose entire career has been about avoiding conflict. Politics was only one aspect of the transformation. Individuals were another. Similar to a previous period in his life, many years ago, when a seemingly kind co-star made things on set miserable. That was long before Apollo 13 or A Beautiful Mind. America's favorite joyful show, The Andy Griffith Show, featured Ron Howard as a child star. Although Mayberry appeared to be a charming little village on television, there wasn't always sunshine there behind the scenes. The majority of fans believed that the trio got along just as well off-screen as they did on. However, little Ron was hesitant to share scenes with Aunt Bee, whose real name was Frances Bavier. Because she was cruel and uncaring toward him, he never felt like the cherished child that America believed him to be. Howard saw an aunt who was stern, demanding, and difficult to get along with, while everyone else saw an aunt who adored her nephew and worried over him. Even when questioned about his time on the show decades later, Howard never lied. All he spoke of was Aunt Bee. Naturally, Howard said nothing at the time. He used to play Opie as a kid. He kept his head down, smiled, and went about his work. However, there were moments when that smile vanished. For example, in the well-known Pickle Story episode when Opie was forced to consume jars of Aunt Bee's infamously poor pickles. The audience was unaware that Ron detested pickles to such an extent that he found it quite unpleasant to eat them repeatedly for several takes. The emotional icing on the cake was being in that scene with Bavier. For years, that tension was concealed and never fully resolved. The fact that Howard and Bavier did not get along was later corroborated by others who worked behind the scenes.